All right, ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the delay. Our esteemed guest, Paul from UCONSPIRACY, has been under one of many Nephilim attacks. Dude comes out of bed. He's able to join us today. Paul, we thank you very much, despite what you're going through right now, to hop on the stream. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for your concern. Yeah. I was a couple of hours ago. I was curled up on the sofa, passing out from nausea, and saw messages, and I quickly slapped myself into it, and here I am. So I'm sorry, we're running late. It's my fault. I'll say that now. But yeah, it's good to be here. It's good to see you again. It's been a while.
I know it's been too long. I feel
Yeah,
like
what's it been?
it
Start of
feels
December?
yeah, it feels like lifetimes ago, man. Many moons, as they
It does.
say.
Yeah, it does.
It's incredible. I've been following your work. I've been going down a lot of rabbit trails around interdimensional ETs, demonic possession. Had Jerry Marzinski on. Very interesting stream. Yeah, it was a lot of fun talking about the nature of demonic possession. Yeah, ET possession. So I've been going down a lot of rabbit holes, and I see so many
Oh
parallels
yeah.
between a lot of your work and a lot of what people are saying in my research. And so, hoping to get into that today. But what I really wanted to kind of dig into in a bit more depth is the Nephilim, obviously, and beyond clowns. And I do want to get into clowns. I think it is a key component of this. But I think where a lot of people get stuck is really understanding who the Nephilim are, where they come from, you know, their history, and what it means for us today. So I wanted to have this stream as basically a reference for a lot of people who, see some of your work, but maybe don't understand, let's say, the whole worldview, or concepts that you're unveiling. So that's kind of the purpose of today, is to kind of go through that process together, so I can get a really good grasp on, what's really going on here, right? Because you dive so deep into a lot of these different concepts. I see the strings attached, but I think for some people they might have a little bit of a struggle, if they're just kind of passive or casual consumers of understanding conspiracy, to really solidify it. So basically, I want to start all the way back to the beginning of creation. And so in your work, you talk a lot about the Garden of Eden, right? What it was, we can hypothecate, and then how Nephilim kind of, that's where they begin, right? They start coming down. So maybe we can start there. So based off your research, what was the Garden of Eden? Like, are we talking a spirit realm here? Are we talking on Earth? Are we talking timelines? From your research, walk us through. Let's start there.
Well, you may be mistaking me for someone else because I don't really talk about the Garden of Eden that much. I, like most people, have speculated on whether it's a spiritual realm or a physical place on Earth. I lean more today towards an actual physical place on Earth, personally.
Okay.
Mainly through a lot of my research into this new post-millennial reign, where the Camp of Saints is type of thing, Mount Zion, the center of the Earth. I'm starting to think maybe there's geographies that have been hidden from us in very, very real ways, and I wouldn't like to speculate exactly where the garden is or where this place is, but I'm leaning more heavily towards it being an actual physical place. And what I talk about is there's possibly two creation myths at the beginning of the Bible, because it says, God created man and woman, plural, at the beginning of Genesis, together at once, and told them to go forth and multiply. And then immediately after that, it goes on to talk about Adam specifically. It says, then God created Adam and formed him from the clay of the earth and breathed life into him, and then basically picked him up and dropped him in a garden somewhere. Now, that's a different story to the first story of God created man and woman and then told them to basically procreate and subdue the earth and take dominion over it.
Mm.
Adam was specifically put in a garden and essentially groomed by God to be a leader,
Mm-hmm.
taught a lot of things, like a protege of a kind, like a son, And I'm not saying Adam is special or different to these other humans in terms of physiology, probably the same, but he is just taken from man as he is and set aside to be trained in how to be a good ruler over the creation that God had created. And it's almost as though God had created this for man, plural, but Adam is going to be the man who gets to lead it all. That's kind of what it was basically coming down to.
Okay, so
And a lot of people,
just on that point, you're saying,
yeah,
because we do see this in Genesis, the dual creation story. So are you kind of hypothecating that man was created separately, and then the Garden of Eden story might be creation too, or the movement of Adam, a creative being, into the Garden of Eden, like as two distinct events?
Well, I couldn't tell you how much time is separated between creation of multiple humans, men, women, and then when Adam was chosen. There's probably a time there which could be decades or centuries for all we know, or millennia. We don't actually know how long that time is. And when I was talking to Gary Wayne about it, he was talking about this even before all that. It's talking about the earth was made form and void, as though it was destroyed once and then regenerated again after God was over the waters, So that's implying there was even a creation way before man even turned up, where something was going on. And we've speculated that maybe that's where the Hindu mythos comes from, the war of the gods. It's a time when there was nothing but gods on the earth, and there was a huge war that destroyed it all, basically. But I haven't really gone that far into that necessarily, because I don't think that's fully necessary for my own work. But it's fun. It's fun for me to speculate about. It's highly heretical and blasphemous to most churchianity ways of thinking, because what they say to me is, Paul, you absolute cretin. Obviously, that story of Adam and Eve is just the same story but told in different times. It's kind of yes. God said to man and woman, go forth and multiply and subdue the earth, but that was after Adam was created and then Eve was created and they were kicked out of the garden. But that's not the chronological order the book actually has it written down, and that's not what it says. Is what I'm saying. It doesn't say that's what happened. It says God created man and woman, plural. There's a pause. God created Adam, put him in the garden. Then Adam got to name all the animals, and then he saw that Adam was alone and says it's not good for man to be alone, implying he's probably done this before and understands that humans shouldn't be alone. So he created Eve to keep his project isolated. Probably he created Eve from Adam. It seems like there was more of a methodical thought process behind this than just let's talk about the aftermath before the fact, which is what people argue is the book is what it's actually saying, and that's not what it says, And then it says when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden for breaking the rules, ate of the apple, they were convinced to do that by a serpentine-like being of some kind, the serpent as it's described. They went out into the world and they were scared for their own life. They were shameful and they felt like they were naked, and it was brutal, and the punishment was that Adam, for whatever they did, it meant now that Adam was no longer of a godly nature in any way, shape, or form. Now it seemed like he had to work for his food. Perhaps that wasn't the case before, but now the ground is difficult. He has to till the ground, and it clearly they lived a life without pain as well, because pain entered into the situation where you get childbirth, and women will suffer through childbirth pain and labors now.
Yep.
So something happened, something drastic happened, and then they end up in the world with the rest of the humans, is what I'm picturing. Because then it says, the families go on then, and they have two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel out of jealousy and pride. Clearly has some kind of horrible spirit within him, and he's cast out and banished, basically. And Cain's like, but the people will kill me. You can't do that. I'm not safe out there. What people? Who's going to kill him? Well, obviously there must be people around if he's scared for his own life.
Yep.
And people argue, well, they had many sons and daughters, and they all had incestual relations with each other for a long time. And it's like, well, genetically, that's actually a terrible way of living and doesn't work very well. It causes severe problems when you start having inbred children. Okay.
Yep.
And I don't think that ever changed. I think that's always been the case. I don't think suddenly it was a different rule for them. Oh well, they were better designed back then, and they could take a few hits to the genetic markers. It was no problem, because they
Yeah.
were more superior to us. I don't think so. I think it's literally there was already diversity of genetics around for them to mate with, and they were all human fundamentally. No corruption yet in terms of genome. You know what I mean? They were all still human. And it says Cain goes to the land of Nod and builds a city. And now you need labor to build a city. You need people, and you need people to fill a city, first of all. And he takes a wife. Doesn't say who he takes a wife with, just that he goes to the land of Nod and then takes a wife. From who does he take a wife? And for me, it's not a problem to imagine that this is the case, but it's not the dogma. It's not what people have been taught through churches. Adam and Eve are and it says, no, you're called Eve because you are the mother of all humanity. Mm-hmm. Okay, now that is actually still true because it's through their lineage, from Eve's lineage, you get to Noah, mm-hmm. who is the last human when the flood comes. So she is still, it was more of a prophecy, I think, than actually a statement of fact for that time. You will be the mother of all living. It's through your seed, uncorrupted by what's to come, through Noah, that will replenish the earth. Okay. So it's still there. It's still there as far as I'm aware. I don't think it's still really an issue. And maybe that's when incest became a thing after the flood, because there was no other choice by that point. Everything got pretty messed up. So It seems like even though there were more people during that antediluvian age that weren't, that God created all at once, basically, and made happen all at once and kind of instantly, they all kind of either corrupted themselves hideously and became monsters, which we'll get into, or died anyway. So they're not even around anymore. So it's kind of a moot, full circle, finished point, if that even was the case, because it was still through Adam and Eve's lineage that the whole earth got populated after the flood. But this is where the genetic corruption comes in. This is the story through Cain's lineage, I believe, is where we get the corruption to begin. And obviously what happened in the garden is the beginning of the rebellion of the angels against God's creation.
Perfect segue. So, angels. I've heard you mention angels you describe them as almost literal stars in the heavens, correct? And that they fell from heaven and there was a war in heaven. And further, you describe them as that they're almost holding up, they're like pillars of creation. Like that's the actual role of angels. Like without all of the angels doing their separate responsibilities as decreed by God, the nature of reality or creation crumbles. So maybe walk us through, what are angels? When we say fall from heavens, is this literally true? And let's springboard off that.
I speculated a lot on my channel. I think you've seen those videos. Is what you're referencing here, and I couldn't say for 100% certainty that these stars that we see with our own eyes are angels, but I am, the longer I've been in this for, and the more I've become immersed in biblical cosmology and theology, the more I'm realizing creation is far more psychedelic than we can comprehend. It's basically the conclusions I've come to, and I'm not here to get into a debate about the shape of anything. I wouldn't call myself a flat earther.
Yep.
I'm more of I haven't got a clue what it is type of guy. It's way beyond our comprehension. Mm-hmm. And to think we can comprehend God's creation, I think is pretty. It's hubris at its finest, really. Yep. I wasn't there when he laid the foundations of this creation. I wasn't there to see it all. I have no idea. Okay, but he does say that the angels were there, and I don't say the angels created anything. I'm not giving them a godlike status, but I do believe they were given pivotal roles to play. That not like to look after God's creation. I mean, literally be a cog within God's creation. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Everything is literally living and conscious in a true sense. So you have like the gods of the trees or the rivers or the seas or the mountains and the air and the wind, and the cycles of the air, and the gods of the torrents and the gods of the everything. Nature has a god attached to it, especially in a lot of ancient pagan beliefs, and I think that's founded in a lot of truth. And you can find parallels to this in other stories outside of the biblical perspective. So For example, I've used the example of the Jade Emperor and the Four Dragons, which is a Chinese tale of the creation myth. And it talked about a time where there was a horrible drought on the earth, and the people were dying of thirst and crying out to the Jade Emperor for help. Now, the Jade Emperor is an analog for God, by the way. So he is the creator God. He was considered the god of everything, the one in control. And the dragons go plead with the Jade Emperor to bring rain to save the people. And the Jade Emperor's like, yeah, I'll deal with it. Don't worry. But the first thing he says is, why have you left your allotted place? Why have you left the sea where I told you needed to be? And I thought that was quite interesting, that for a dragon or an angel, let's say, to leave its place where it should be, which in this case was the ocean, was a serious thing in the eyes of God. It's kind of, you need to be in your spot where I told you to be, and I think for a angel to leave its first estate is no trivial thing. It's not just as simple as, well, I don't want to be here anymore, I'm going to leave. When they make that choice to leave their position, it's like removing a cog from a clock. Mm-hmm. And what happens to the clock when you do that? It breaks. And I think that was the rebellion of the third of the angels, choosing to break God's creation. And I think we live in that, or maybe if it's not been changed now through what Christ did, but we lived within that for a long time as well. I think stars, it seems like, are angels, because it's talked about in Enoch, for example, that the wandering stars, what we call planets, well, they are being punished in the future, according to the book of Enoch, when he has the vision of heaven. They are imprisoned for what they did, for not coming forth at the report of God's planned map and route for them. Mm-hmm. And when you think about that concept, you think about throughout history that the planets have been worshipped as gods. Yes. In fact, the Roman gods are analogous with planets. They are the same thing. They've equated the two together. So again, by those stars choosing not to stay still, they created religions that worship them. Mm-hmm. That's a detrimental effect on all of creation by doing that. There's a reason why the stars shouldn't move, because humans will start treating them like gods. Yes. But they chose to do that anyway, and they let humans treat them like gods. This is what I mean. This is all a part of the same rebellion at the end of the day. And I believe so these dragons, for example, never mind the fact that they left where they should have been in this Chinese myth, they also went against the wishes of the Jade Emperor and brought water to the people themselves, because the Jade Emperor was being callous and wasn't paying attention to the needs of the people. Mm-hmm. So they thought, well, we'll just do it ourselves, Then the cruel, evil dictator Jade Emperor punished the four dragons for giving water to the people by putting them imprisoned under mountains. Now, that's actually the story of the fallen angels being locked in the abyss in Tartarus for what they did, until the end times when they'll be released. Abaddon and his scorpions and all that sort of thing. So it's kind of, you see analogues in other mythologies of something happened in the ancient past where fiery, flying, dragon-like serpent beings interacted with humanity in ways that went massively against the creator God's wishes,
Yes.
And created offspring is another common thread. The watch glass angels, who their job was to be caretakers over God's creation, which was man. Mm-hmm. And they were treated as gods during that time, and I think they enjoyed that. And when Adam came along, and basically God started giving him all the attention, and was grooming a human to be ruler over them, I don't think they liked that idea. I really don't. I think that's where the first form of pride and jealousy from, and I do think Lucifer, who's perhaps he's the epitome of pride in that respect, it was him who led that rebellion against many of the angels to say, no, we're not going to bow down to a primitive man, like a mammal-like creature. Gary Wayne speculates that these were serpent-like gods, these angels. They were dragons, and they likely thought a reptile should have been chosen as the master race, to inherit the earth. Reptiles are far more mammals type of, why would God choose a stupid, barely evolved type monkey type thing over the superior reptile creature who's more powerful, more agile, more vicious, more cunning? Why wouldn't you choose them? And that's the story of the Garden of Eden, isn't it? The serpent, which walked in the Garden of Eden, by the way, had legs. It's described. People say that that's the devil. Satan. And it's like, well, it doesn't actually say that. It just says the serpent. So maybe the serpent was a upright, walking, humanoid-like reptilian creature. Perhaps they were around at some point, And it says, it convinced Eve to partake of the fruits of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. People have argued it had sex with Eve and created Cain, which is like a reptilian offspring, maybe. I don't know if we have much evidence for that other than pure speculation, but it's worthy of note, perhaps. But even if that wasn't the case, just convincing them to rebel against God was good enough, and it caused the first fall of God's creation in true respect. And the whole thing motivating it was pride and jealousy through and through. And the punishment for that serpent who did that was that they would have to crawl on their belly for the rest of their lives and eat the dust of the earth. People have said the dust of the earth is a reference to humans because we're made of dust.
Yep.
From dust to dust is where we go. It's where we came from and where we go back to. So people are arguing that this reptilian creature had to go underground and its only food source from now on is human beings. And there'll be enmity in the woman's seed. So the reptilian seed and the human seed will be at war with each other, and the end result is that you'll bite their heel, but they'll crush your head. So they'll lose that war. So what does that mean? Who is this reptilian race that we're at war with forever until the end, where we become victorious, which is, again, prophesizing Jesus Christ coming and putting an end to it all and giving us the full authority over all the other kind, the kind that never should have existed, this corruption to humanity and God's creation.
Yeah.
But all this rebellion goes right back to this beginning time period. Absolutely. And some kind of reptilian race was involved that walked in the Garden of Eden, was well known enough to approach Eve without her running away screaming. It wasn't like maybe they trusted each other at first, and then it's kind of a birds of a feather flock together situation. The seraphim reptilian type fiery flying serpent angels came to the serpent-like beings and said, have you seen that God's giving more attention to Adam over you? Is that fair? Maybe we should team up. Let's make this our world. It's kind of and the reptile looked at the reptile god and went, yes, you look just like me. I'm on your side, that type of thing. You know what I mean? Again, I can only speculate and put the story together here, but something like that must have happened. Gary, again, went on to say this is probably where dinosaurs came from. These gods created images and beings in their own image. Giant reptiles, you know what I mean? But again, that's going way out there. That's beyond my understanding. But you can go on for a while with this. But yes, I think angels are intrinsically linked with creation, and not all the angels rebelled. Remember that they're not all bad, okay? But the ones that did, they broke creation when they left the place. They broke it. They made it. Maybe this is why we have seasons. Maybe this is why there's death on the earth, why we have the cycles, and why, it seems like nature wants to kill us all the time. Maybe this is where it all came from, this initial rebellion. Maybe the earth was originally a peaceful place where we could inhabit it without fear of death or pain. But something happened at that pinnacle moment where they convinced us to rebel, where pain came into the earth no longer would work with Adam anymore. You had to work hard to make food grow. Things started going wrong with it all. And it became effort to exist here suddenly. Right. And I think the angels had a lot to do with that, with the rebellion. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. I love how you tie together so many different cultures that are telling similar stories, right? And I think exactly as you said, a lot of Christians, that's blasphemy to them. But I think, in your defense, I think that actually adds a lot more to the validity of what we're reading in the Bible and in these stories, right? When we have diverse cultures speaking, to similar phenomenon, yes, in different language, yes, not identical, but the broad strokes are very similar. I think it actually lends a lot of credence. So, I really appreciate all of the research you've done on that. But so not just in the Old Testament, but throughout a lot of different mythos throughout the world, we hear of these fallen angels, which are, yes, described as like both beautiful but also serpentine. We have the interbreeding. And so I want to flesh that out a little bit, right? I'm just personally curious in your research, was this a consensual mating? Like, were these guys just way more badass than actual human men, and the women were like powerless? Was this like a force or coercion type situation? And so what's really going on here, right? So the mating of fallen angels with man, you know, what led to that? How's it happening? What are the results?
Sure. So maybe for this one, I'll do a reading from that chapter of my book where I laid this out. Maybe
Yeah,
that might
please.
make it clear. It's only a few pages, and I think it might be good for my listeners to see the page as well. And this is what I've kind of got. This is first draft stuff, by the way. But the first part of my book, the first 10 chapters, are going through the whole history we're going through today. Okay,
Perfect.
so I've titled this one Chapter 5, Jealousy and Pride Incarnate the Nephilim. So this is how it all came together. So
Perfect.
I'll go on. So we have discussed so far the two factions who are out for revenge against God due to their own petty shortcomings and insecurities and reasonings. Cain with his progeny and the rebellious angels. From a mutual understanding, a bizarre union was formed with the sole purpose of destroying and warping creation beyond redemption. Cain and all his progeny were corrupt in all their ways on the earth, abusing the knowledge of the sacred sciences passed down to them from their forefather Adam, twisting this holy knowledge to control the peoples of day 6 and build his oppressive cities over all the land to contain them. His sons went on to pervert the knowledge further, maintaining dominance by forming secret societies and creating hieroglyphic languages to pass the knowledge down through the family without the profane masses understanding it. Some worshipping serpent cults dedicated to keeping the people in line through total religious fascist control were established. These cults diverted the people's attention towards idolatrous pagan concepts such as astrological mysticism over the sun, stars and moon, and earth worship, while also attesting to multiple gods existing over the earthly and heavenly domains rather than one creator god. These pantheons were made a reality by our second faction, the Archon rulers. The rebellious angels agreed with Lucifer that man was not worthy to be bowed down to when compared to their glory and power. These angels were once the rulers over all things in creation. They had dominion over all humans before the creation of Adam, and they had no intention of losing that to a pathetic man just because God said it should be so. These angels knocked Adam off his pedestal through deceit and false promises, tearing him from the Garden of Eden into a lower and corrupted state. Then they simply sat back and watched with tentative eyes, observing Cain murder his brother Abel before being sent out into the world in exile.
Hmm.
They watched on as he abused the knowledge given to him by his father to exert his control over the peoples of day 6, no doubt seeing in Cain and his children the same unrepentant spirit of stubborn rebellion they saw in themselves. Both factions felt utterly betrayed, abandoned by God, and as the old saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. 6 generations passed as the angels watched the righteous seed of Seth and the spurious seed of Cain grow over the earth in tandem. One agrarian and peaceful in their approach to living on the edge of the sacred sciences, the other domineering, industrial, and warlike with their sacred knowledge. By the 6th generation, the land was well divided among these two competing bloodlines, and the angels had no doubt established themselves as the gods they once were, with the help of the sons of Cain. Much speculation has been given as to how the infamous union between angelic beings and human women first came to be. We know from Genesis 6 that the angels thought human women were beautiful. It has been speculated that Lucifer, working with Cain, took the daughters of Cain, adorning them with beautiful clothes, makeup, and jewelry, before leading them up Mount Hermon and offering them to the Watchers for sex, tempting them to commit the ultimate sin against the order of creation. However, in the book of Enoch, it's said that the fallen angel came to the earth with the sole intention of corrupting mankind, after already noticing how beautiful the human women were. This would mean that no outside temptation from Lucifer was necessary. As we can read, quote, "And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose our wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Semyaza, who was their leader, said to them, I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty of the great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves in mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. They swore, they all bound together, and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And there were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. Though it doesn't say that the daughters of Cain seduced the angels, it would be a safe assumption to make that these women were still willing participants in this act. What we can know for certain from Enoch is that the only thing holding the angels back was fear of the punishment they knew they would have to suffer for committing such an abomination. The angels not only mixed themselves sexually with humans, but also taught them things that only made them more and more destructive as a force on earth. Quote, "Thou seest that Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And Semyaza, to whom has given all authority to bear rule over his associates. And they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with the blood and unrighteousness." End quote. All this started in the time of Jared, who was the 6th generation from Adam, with Noah being the 10th. This means we can know it only took 4 generations, though these generations were far longer by modern standards, to completely destroy creation from its initial incursion. What the angels did by mixing their immortal essence with mortal women and creating demigod giants was a modern equivalent of releasing a flesh-eating virus on the earth and letting it run rampant until nothing was left. It was truly an unforgivable act, and the Nephilim created from this union were truly destructive and a brutal force, as was described in the dramatic detail in Enoch. Quote, "And they became pregnant, and they bore great giants whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against the birds and the beasts and the reptiles, to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood." End quote. These giants could not be sustained by mankind serving them. These beasts had an appetite that just could not be satisfied. In order to attempt to quell their hunger, they ate all the crops that mankind grew before turning against mankind and eating them. Then they defiled the animals. Even Giants is an apocryphal Jewish book which expands upon the Genesis narrative of the Hebrew Bible. In a similar manner to the book of Enoch, it lays out the story of the Watchers and the creations until the flood that destroys them. Dr. J. Winters gives a summary of each chapter in their translation for the complete Book of Enoch Standard English Version. Here's the summary of the 4 chapters. Chapter 1. The Watchers were grieved over the sins of mankind and petitioned God to let them descend to the earth to teach the sons of men righteousness and to rebuke them. God grants their petition. Azazel is sent down to prepare the way for the Watchers. Azazel prepares the way, and the Watchers descend, and they begin to teach them righteousness. And Enoch is chosen by the Watchers to serve as a mediator between the men and the Watchers, and seduce them. Azazel, with Semyaza's help, instigates the fall of the 200 Watchers and their followers. Glorious nature become bound to fleshly bodies as a consequence of their joining sexually to flesh. They begin to reveal to their heavenly wives the earthly secrets. Chapter 3 says the Watchers have their own families with humans and also with animals, and those that were defiled by them gave birth to giants. These giants began to grow to massive sizes and become full of greed and corruption. They kill many dragons, and the sons of Cain worship them for protecting them. The children of Cain are no longer able to sustain the giants with their offerings of vegetables and grain, so the giants turn on them and kill them and begin to eat them. The giants develop a taste for blood and begin eating any moving thing, including each other. The Watchers teach some of the secrets they were appointed over to keep from the sons of man. The giants imitate the sins of their fathers, the Watchers, and take for themselves wives and animal mates, and they begat Nephil and Elio. God, seeing all this wickedness, sent Enoch to declare to Shamyaza and the fallen watchers that they will soon be punished for causing the earth to be so corrupted. The fascinating difference in this version of events is the additional motivation for the watchers to come to earth. According to the Book of Giants, they requested to come to earth to prevent the righteousness of man. Sorry, the unrighteousness of man. I need to edit that. So yeah, apparently according to this, the angels came down because they saw that man was becoming unrighteous, and God, could we go down and teach them how to be righteous, please? Apparently that's a weird one. So it appears their intentions were pure to begin with. It also appears that Azazel and Shamyaza, alternatively Semyaza, the two leaders of the Watchers, though it is argued that these are actually the same creature, not two separate entities, by Gary, I think, they came to earth first to prepare a way for the angels before they arrived. What this means is up for debate, but the next chapter makes it clear that they are the two angels who help the daughters of Cain seduce the other angels. So one can assume that Azazel and Semyaza had already sided with Lucifer in this rebellion before requesting to come down to earth as watchers. They likely consorted with Cain's progeny in preparation to corrupt the other watchers as a part of Lucifer's revenge for placing humanity above angels. This is very interesting, as a Coptic fragment of the Book of Giants seems to show that this must have been planned well in advance of the Watchers' arrival. Quote, before the Egregori rebelled and descended from heaven, a prison had been built for them in the depths of the earth beneath the mountains, before the sons of the giants were born, who knew not righteousness and piety among themselves. 36 towns had been prepared and erected, so that the sons of the giants should live in them. They should come to beget. Though not much information is given who built these cities for the yet uncreated Nephilim, we know Cain and his progeny had a propensity to build cities, this being the first thing Cain did after being exiled from God's presence. Perhaps this was a part of Azazel's preparing the way from the Book of Giants. It seems likely if we consider the Book of Giants to be legitimate, and it's certainly fun to speculate. Another interesting point to take from the 3rd chapter of the Book of Giants is that the Nephilim also created their own offspring through the rape of women and animals, thus creating Nephil and Elio. This could be explained for the creation of the bizarre hybrid monsters found throughout ancient mythology, something we'll explore in the next few chapters. The creation of the Nephilim is an epic story spanning over an unknown aeon of time we can only get glimpses of through ancient texts, passed down through oral traditions and archaic languages. The story revolves around angels and humans teaming up in rebellion against the Creator for a bid at total domination of his creation. The Nephilim played a pivotal role in Lucifer's revenge story as foot soldiers for the fascist antediluvian world order. But how exactly did they play this evil role before their utter destruction? So that's the end of that chapter, and then I go on to talk about how they became the kings and rulers in chapter 6. But there you go. There's many theories of whether it was consensual or not. It seems like the one theory is that the angels came down with good intentions originally, but then they were corrupted by the leaders who maybe had bad intentions, so there was a bit of deception going on, perhaps. That's one theory. Another theory is that Lucifer brought beautiful women to the Watchers on Mount Hermon to tempt them, and they gave in to the temptations. So you have some stories that show sympathy for the devil, some stories that show that the devils were outright evil to begin with, like in the Book of Enoch. They came down 100% knowing what they were going to do, and even made a pact to go through with it because they knew they would be punished. So who can say whether it was consensual or not? But I think the daughters of Cain were fully on board, but especially with having sex with angels. I don't think they were on board with having sex with the angels' children, the Nephilim. I think that was a case of rape. And the Nephilim then created their own offspring, which was the Nephil and the Elio. And I don't think there's anything consensual about that at all. So there you go.
Women, eh? They just messing it all up. No, just kidding.
Yeah, but they teamed up with Cain and his side. They were all in it together, They all knew God's already forsaken Cain. He doesn't care, he's fully on board with it. Let's go with it. I already know my fate. I'm a murderer in his eyes. Forget it. Let's just keep going. Let's just roll. Why not? I think that's what it was like. And the angels had committed to going against God. It's like, we're all in. Let's just mess everything up as much as we can. And that's what they did. That's certainly what they did. All the stories talk about that, and that's exactly what happened. It was a horrible time, a truly horrible time.
Wow. Yeah, it's an incredible story. I just imagine, the angels up in heaven in bliss with God, and then some of the angels are like, "Man, have you seen Eve down there? Like, you guys got to check this out." And then, it's just fine, really funny. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's a fantastic story. I'm very excited for your book, by the way, and I think that gives a lot more context than just a passive read of Genesis, and you're tying in a lot of different lore and legends from different areas. So thank you for providing this. But at a certain point, these Nephilim start to die, right? And
yes.
You postulate that their death is what has created what we now call demons, right? They're disembodied
Yes.
spirits, right? So walk us through that.
Sure. I won't read. I won't read the passage from my book. I'll just skim over this one from my own memory now. But yeah, so it does say in the Book of Enoch specifically that these giants who have caused severe pain and misery on the earth, in death, the spirits get stuck on earth and wanders the earth, hungering and thirsting and causing offenses and generally just making life miserable for humans from the spirit realm from then on. But they are still here on earth with us, just disembodied. And so it's laid out very clearly that that's the fate of the Nephilim. They're not compatible to leave the earth. They can't go up to any other realm. That they don't have a God-given soul necessarily. They just seem to have a spirit, and that spirit could be of their father, the devil. It's clearly not of God. You know what I mean? It's this incompatible, never should have been there to begin with type of coding in the Matrix that can only remain on Earth as a corruption or a virus within it, basically. So that's kind of what we're dealing with now. Ghosts in the machine, shall we say?
Yeah.
That's what they are. They are this thing that's in the plumbing of our universe, of our reality that we live in embodied. They're kind of stuck in behind the walls. They're stuck in this place where they can't interact with us. They can't communicate with us, but we can open channels to them. And that's where a lot of ancestor spirit worship cultures and rituals come into play. Even today, this is what satanic rituals are really all about. You know what I mean? It's kind of creating the showing yourself willing to be possessed. I was talking yesterday to someone called Demon Erasers who was explaining it really well to me in our after talk, which I'm going to put on Patreon tomorrow, I think, or maybe the end of the week. But he was basically explaining how, these people who basically sacrifice children and pour their blood all over the floor and start eating them and all this type of thing in these invocation rituals to get in touch with demons. Well, when a demon sees people doing that, it's kind of like, there's no God in this guy. We're safe. We can reveal ourselves to them. And they're willing to let us be there. Someone who had any God in them at all wouldn't be brutally torturing and murdering infants and eating them. You know what I mean? It's kind of,
Yep.
And that's all these rituals are really there to do. They're actually there to prove that the demon's safe to reveal themselves to you. Okay? Because we have Jesus now. This is the difference. We have weapons against them. Okay? So they have to know that the people they are becoming visible to or possessing or being channeled into, who's allowing them in, it's a safe place for them to be, where someone isn't going to just spring up and go, in the name of Jesus, I bind you, that type of stuff. You know what I mean? They don't want that to happen. So they'll only go to those people who are doing the most heinous rituals because it's proving that, okay, these people are in for it. We're fine. We're cool, And that puts a whole new spin on it because it takes away all this pomp and circumstance that these ritual performers think they have. I'm doing all this specific cool stuff because it gives me power over the demon. It's like, no, you have no power over them. All you've done is just prove you're a patsy they can use. That's all it really is. That's all the ritual proves to them. You know what I mean? And it's kind of funny. But yeah, that's what they are. They are the disembodied spirits of Nephilim. But I have theorized that as I was describing there, when the Nephilim were killed, now the Nephilim are a very specific type of creature. Okay, not all demons are Nephilim, but all Nephilim are demons. It's one of these type of situations. All
Mm-hmm.
right. So the Nephilim are the original offspring, the OG enormous 300L tall giants. These like size of mountains, these things. You know what I mean? They kept going and going. They devoured the whole earth because they were just enormous. And they were psychedelic as hell. They were the perfect cross between a dragon and a human. Okay, so they look like clowns. That's my whole theory. That's where that comes into the play. They have these big, wide, serpentine-like mouths, sharp teeth, huge, bulging eyes, wild, crazy, feathered hair, bright red, glowing with some kind of amazing, insane aura from their angelic parent lineage. They probably had weird telepathic, telekinesis abilities beyond comprehension. They were truly terrifying monsters to behold, wild and bloodthirsty. That's the Nephilim. And then the Nephilim had their own children. They had the Nephil, and then those Nephil had their own children. So we're getting watered down here through the generations, and more weirder looking, lesser creations of Nephilim, not as tall, started being made. I think they also became disembodied spirits, the Nephil and the Leo. I speculated that the lowest levels maybe are Bigfoot today, the hairy giants, the ones that got really hairy, and like beast-like, but aren't necessarily the original Nephilim straight. They have like a quarter angel blood in them. They're not like half and half type of thing, or they have like an eighth. I think they survived the flood. Gary speculates that pocket dimensions were made for them to go to be safe from the flood by the fallen angel grandparents. This type of thing. So that's a whole of the speculation we'll get into soon about how they got after the flood. But yeah, I think they all became the Nephilim, and the Nephilim hybrids that went down, they definitely became demons, sure. Because it says in the Book of Enoch, the punishment for the Watchers for doing this and making these monsters was to watch their beloved ones kill each other. So it says the giants started to eat each other. They started eating one another once they couldn't find anything else. And that was horrible. That was the angels having to watch their children eat each other alive. That was probably a horrible punishment to watch, and it explains how Michael couldn't bear to watch the punishment of the Watchers. And he was like, no one's going to do that again. That's basically what he says in the book. Okay, there's no way angels are going to do that again after watching the punishment. It was brutal. Okay, and then the angels were bound in chains, and the Nephilim were dead. They were all gone. They were wiped out. There weren't any Nephilim left. And this is not, the flood hasn't even happened yet. So the OG Nephilim wiped out. Maybe their descendants may have survived, or, the grandchildren of the Nephilim. So maybe they're still around. It doesn't really say much about them necessarily. But then after that, like I said, they were never going to mate with humans again because the punishment's too great. But it does seem like, in the Book of Jasher talks about this, they convinced humanity to manipulate their own genetics instead. And this is where the mixing of kinds phrase comes from. Yeah. And this is about the 200-year period just before the flood. And this is where the remaining humans, remember, all flesh became corrupted. That's what the Bible says, specifically before the flood, okay? This is what Jasher's talking about. They literally mixed themselves with animals and became human-animal hybrids just before the flood. They tried to become like Nephilim. They tried to Nephilimify themselves to be like the Nephilim, because they wanted to be like gods themselves. They idolized these creatures. The Nephilim are gone. The world's brutal and horrible. What human during this time, where it's full of rape, murder, and pillaging and sin and nothing but chaos, wouldn't take the chance to have the skin of a beetle armored, or the strength of an ox, or the wings of a bird so they can fly? Who wouldn't take these extra perks to give them an edge to survive in such a brutal reality? They would, and they did. They all did. That's the point. They all fully corrupted themselves. Genetic splicing, hybridization was going on. Then you get dogmen, mothmen, mermaids, centaurs, all the mythical creatures you can imagine. This is where they all come from. The Nagas of India, the half serpent, half human people. You know what I mean? You can name any cryptid phenomenon that's still around today, that's said on every continent, everywhere. I believe all these cryptids are remnants of the survivors of this event after the flood. Because if you have wings, you can survive a flood. You can fly above the waters as they rise and then rest upon the waters afterwards. If you've got the hardiness or the ability of a bear, you could hibernate underground for a long period of time and not have to eat or anything. You could give yourself abilities that give you hardiness to withstand a long time where there's a flood happening before it recedes. And the earth is full of stories of survivors of floods, great floods that utterly just wipe out everything. Events from all over the earth talking about the same event. But
Yep.
these survivors aren't Noah. They're like two brothers who just randomly climb to the peak of an extremely tall mountain. First of all, how hard is it to climb to the peak of an extremely tall mountain quickly while there's a flood happening? Okay, you need to have some kind of powers to get there to the top very quick. Okay, you're not a human if you can get away with doing that. Then who can then hang on to the tip of that mountain for long enough for the waters to recede? You're not a human if you can withstand that long and not die. Okay, these were not humans who were surviving these floods. All flesh, bar Noah, was corrupted, which means they all were given powers of some kind. Okay, they all had some kind of strength or ability human beings just could not have. And even that flood survival myth, once the waters recede, these two men rape some half bird, half women hybrids who were flying around, these macaw women. This is the story of the Canary peoples in Ecuador. They still believe this today, that they are the descendants of these particular survivors who raped these bird women. They don't lie about it. That's said. Yep, that's where we come from. We're the descendants of these hybrids. These are humans who survived the flood through hybridization.
Wow.
And it says in the Bible, people say, no, the flood killed everything but Noah and his family. It says, well, it doesn't actually say that. Legalistically speaking, it says it killed everything that was on the surface of the earth. Birds aren't on the surface of the earth. Things underground aren't on the surface of the earth either. Things who can survive in the water, like mermaid fish people, they're not on the surface of the earth. They can survive. Okay, so it's legalistically speaking, there is room to not corrupt God's word there and contradict. It does allow for that. And this is probably how they got after the flood. This is how they managed to get here.
Yeah.
That corruption continued.
Yeah. Man, very interesting stuff. Guys, as much as we think today's times are complex, think about back then, we got, alien human hybrids kicking around. We got just the most craziest animals. We got giants the size of mountains. And sometimes I see these photos of guys like showing a picture of a mountain or a big rock formation, and it actually does look a lot like a petrified person. Obviously, we have like pattern bias, so I just find it interesting.
Yeah.
But some of those photos I'm sure you've seen. Do you think there's something to that? Like, do we actually see petrified Nephilim on the planet today?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we're living on top of the remains of flesh, of petrified flesh. I do think that's the case now. And not only that, the Earth shows clear signs of extreme mining operations as well. And I think the surface of the Earth we live on is basically a wasteland compared to what it used to be. All the big trees have been cut down, and they've been petrified as huge boulders as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
all the resources were mined as much as they possibly could during this time to build these glorious cities that go up to heaven. Like Tower of Babel, for example. This impossible sized building. I think this goes with the whole corruption of the earth. They destroyed everything, and I think a lot of these mountain ranges, like you said, are the petrified remains of these enormous, incomprehensible sized giants and creatures and monsters. Not just giants. Some of these were hybridized animals as well. It was ridiculous. And there's a channel called, I think it's Mud Fossil University, and and it's been around for years, and I've briefly dipped in and out. But he basically goes around showing how you can see in geology and rock formations. You can compare it to things within human bodies, like how flesh is layered, for example, how the epidermis of a skin is layered. You can see the exact same pattern in this rock formation here. How like muscles are in the body and how muscle veins work. You can see that there's actually rocks that look just like petrified muscle everywhere, with the same color as well. It looks like meat that's just turned into semi-precious stones, as we call them today. I think there's a lot of that stuff. Yeah, I think the evidence is actually all around us when we start to actually look. Which we find with most theories. That's usually how it is until you start looking, like the whole. Well, I'm not going to go into it. Never mind. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. There's evidence is clear to show that yes, there are bodies just strewn all over this land. Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, it's very interesting stuff. I'll check out that Mud Fossil University because I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to get into that a little bit more. Okay, so things get very whack on the realm, and God says, "Flood it," and then it's flood. Aside for some Nephilim, and then, so what I found interesting about your theory is, right, if we look back into a lot of the ancient structures that still exist on here on the planet, right? Even though modern history is telling us that these are from, isolated tribes long ago, savages that just happened to build these, it does, if you dig, even pull back one layer, let alone multiple, that this is the same culture, right? You can even see it's a straight line all across the planet where all of these wonders of the world and structures are being built, right? And they have the same flair. They have the same building technique. They
Mm-hmm.
even use the same hieroglyphs and such. So when I hear the flood realm and some in your take of only Nephilim survived, is it safe to say that there were surviving Nephilim that then spread out to the rest of the world to kind of set up their own mini kingdoms? What's going
Yeah.
on post flood? Because we see Nephilim kind of all over the place, right?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of speculation about how the corruption came back after the flood. There are so many theories, it's ridiculous. A lot of people really focus on Canaan, through Ham, through Noah, and what was the curse of Ham exactly when he uncovered his father's nakedness? It says, your offspring would be cursed. Specifically, Canaan got the brunt of that, Um, and then it's through Canaan's lineage that we're supposed to have the Nephilim arrive. And it was in the lands of Canaan where the Nephilim are everywhere, which Israel then has to go through and wipe out God's edict to claim back this promised land. You know what I mean? So there's something happened within Canaan, and the speculation is wild. It ranges
Okay.
from Ham raped his father, or raped his mother. I've heard both. It depends on which
Okay.
source you go to. And through raping his own mother, through incest, gave birth to Canaan. Therefore, Canaan was cursed. You know,
Okay.
and through that sin, the Nephilim began to be born again. But that just doesn't make sense. I don't think that's enough, personally. It's more likely that it was, I don't know, some kind of curse did happen, and maybe it was a Cain situation again. All right, well, I've been forsaken by my family and God, so I'm going to rebel and I'm going to team up with the Nephilim that are around. Maybe that's what happened again. You know what I mean? It's something similar. Because then you get to Nimrod as well, and then the speculation through the same line through Ham that Nimrod became a mighty man or a Gibborim. Now, Gibborim is a word used to describe Nephilim. It's also a word to describe just mighty warriors who are human too. So not all Gibborim are Nephilim, but all Nephilim are Gibborim. So it's one of those other complicated translation issues. So what does it mean that he became a mighty man? Well, it could simply mean that he says he became a mighty hunter in the eyes of the Lord and all this type of stuff. Did he Nephilimify himself? Did he also do this type of stuff that was happening just before the flood? And Gary has implied, that during this empire that Nimrod built, he had, you know, um, wizards around him who were translating the hieroglyphs left behind on pillars by Enoch and his cults before the flood. They unearthed it after the flood, and they regained the knowledge, which was sealed in vaults, as it's described that Enoch did. Enoch the bad, by the way. There's two Enochs. There's Enoch the good, who judged the Watchers, and was an intermediary between them. There's Enoch the bad from Cain, the firstborn of Cain. So he was way before the good Enoch, okay? He was the one who created and occulted secret societies and the knowledge. And it was his offspring who continued those cults all the way down. So then this hidden knowledge was discovered after the flood. That reintroduced hybridization, which reintroduced Nimrod the ability to turn himself into it. Then he created a tower which reached the heavens, kind of like recreating a Mount Hermon situation. So people have argued that tower was built to link themselves back with angels in order to get angels to mate with humans again, to do a second incursion theory, it's called. The angels did it again. But as I described earlier, I mean, there's no way the angels would choose to do that again. No way. The punishment's too great. They've seen the consequences of that action. It's highly unlikely there was a second incursion of angels. highly unlikely. It does say, there were giants in the earth in those days and also after that. So we know they did appear, and we know through numbers, and the books clearly tell stories of giants called Rephaim this time. They called them a different name, but they were still giants, and we were as grasshoppers in their sight in the lands of Canaan. And God's telling us to just go in there and kill them, and by having such lack of faith, they had to wander the wilderness for 40 years. And after that hardiness that they built in by wandering the wilderness as a punishment for not believing that God will give you the power to kill them, they believed by that point. And they were like, we're ready. We're battle hardened. We've been through wars now. We know how to fight. Let's go in there and do them. We have defeated every enemy so far. God's behind us. Let's go in there and kill these giants. Joshua going just going at it. You know what I mean? And they did. They decimated them, one after the other, just wiping out these enormous creatures, like true Attack on Titan style, you know what I mean? Just annihilating them. And I'm sure the giants caught wind of this. They were like, these humans are just wiping everybody out. And I think a lot of them fled. I think a lot of giants and Nephilim fled at that moment, They were like, let's get out of here. We're next, What the hell's going on that these humans can kill us? Clearly something's going on. We have to leave, and the stories of giants making it really, really, really far north, like the Tunic peoples near the Eskimo peoples, really far north, the Inuit types, and the Tunic tribe. The Inuit tribes talk about the Tunics, which is a tribe of giants who flee from them. Like whenever they see humans, they run away. They don't stick around. So that's an interesting take on it. This is like a more modern take on, are these giants who fled the original culling, and we're like, don't go near humans, we won't win. God's edict is that we die if we battle humans. You know what I mean? Is that why they flee? Because what giant would flee from a tiny human? It's just so odd, isn't it? Such odd behavior, unless there's this, hit out on them. It's kind of like, if we fight humans, we die. That's kind of the deal now. We're not going to win this. God is on their side. So it's interesting how the giants got there specifically. I couldn't say, but I've given you so many examples of how it's possible. Never mind the whole surviving the flood thing. That's another version as well. But like I said, these survivors wouldn't have been the true Nephilim. They would have been humans who corrupted themselves. And I believe if you Nephilimify yourself and corrupt the flesh like that, you've corrupted the soul. So when you die, you now become a demon as well. You're also stuck here, just like the Nephilim. So if we talk, just quickly link back to the point earlier you were making about, demons and are they the Nephilim? Yes, demons are Nephilim, but not all demons are Nephilim. Do you get what I mean? It's kind of, you have these other people who corrupted themselves, and the consequence of that is to become one as well. So I think there's a hierarchy of lesser demons, which used to be human, and then there's the OG Nephilim, which are the true demons. But how they appeared, I don't know. Rephaim is an interesting name. If you want to get into the etymology of what a Rephaim is, I mean, it basically means, and I've retranslated this in modern terms, it means zombie. More than anything, an undead creature. That's what it basically means in our language today. But the original translations use phrases like the dead ones, spirits or shades, shadows of former things, resurrected, healed ones, the healers. And what you're talking about there is something like a vampire is undead, has been resurrected, and when damaged, heals very quickly. You're talking like a vampire. It's kind of like a Rephaim or a zombie, because it's specifically made clear, and Gary Wayne was talking about this, wherever the humans contended with these creatures after the flood in more documented histories, they had to take off the head to make sure it stayed down. That's zombie-like, vampire-like behavior, you know what I mean? That's like straight out of our movies today. Go for the head. It's the only way to make sure they don't get back up again, And that's what David did when he killed Goliath, a Rephaim, cut off the head, held it up for everyone to see, and the Philistines ran, because it's like, it's happening again, quick, go. We're not winning this one, this just go. So it's interesting, but Rephaim is such a strange way to describe giants, because before the flood, they were called Nephilim. So Nephilim means tyrannical giant ruler of a fallen nature, from the roots Nephil and Nephol, which means tyrannical giant ruler, fallen. So that's what it means. People think, oh, it's got the word fallen in it, so it must mean fallen angel. It's like, no. We have a name for fallen angels. They're called angels. Angels are not Nephilim. Stop calling them Nephilim. They're the offspring of them, and the name makes that very clear. But people still argue with me today that, no, by the very definition, Nephilim are fallen angels. It's like, no, they're not. I've just told you the very definition using the Hebrews translation. They are not fallen angels. That has to be clear, because if people are going from that perspective, they are way off. They need to get that squared quickly. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, Nephilim are not fallen angels. They are a specific class of creature. They are the offspring of fallen angels. But the Rephaim, why call them Rephaim? You know, they have the Valley of the Rephaim, which means basically the Valley of the Dead. Is it possible that these bodies were washing up after the flood, and somehow they resurrected them through some kind of magic or something? Or did the spirits of the dead Nephilim manage to animate into a body of some kind and come back, be resurrected, you know, come back in a new body of some kind? There's loads of, how did this happen, and why the name changed? Why this name change from, you know, Nephilim, giant, profound, glowing, terrifying beast ruler, to an undead zombie-like creature? It's just a strange name, and why not use the same name? You know, something weird happened after the flood, but they were there. They were absolutely there, and they had an odd quality about them. That's for sure. Very, very undeadish. Very, very resurrected Frankenstein monster type, you know, weirdness going on after the flood.
Yeah, to put it mildly, weirdness, I would say. Wow. Yeah, very fascinating. And that's what's so interesting. Most of the themes that we see today in sci-fi and horror, they are all pulling from a lot of these phenomenon that we see throughout many different cultures. And yeah, I would be curious on the zombie front, vampire front. I have some theories, but I'm curious, do you see that something, there's just this heavy zombie programming constantly, right? So I'm curious, what's up with that? Is that just a largely trying to brainwash us to be sheep? Do you think they actually have this technology again that they could unleash that on people? Like, where do you come in on that, I guess?
Last time I talked about that concept, I got a strike on my channel and the video was immediately removed. So I'd rather not comment on it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going with that.
Yeah, if people want to see that, they can go to my Patreon channel and watch that video that was banned. If you remember, my Patreon is there, because there was a lot of theorizing going along not that long ago, around just before Halloween period, I think the month was, where everyone thought that was going to happen to everybody because a particular thing was about to happen, where a thing was about to be activated, which would send a signal to your thing that's in your pocket all the time. I'm trying to be clever about it here, and everyone thought that would activate a thing that's within everybody, which would then turn everybody into a certain thing, which is what we've been programmed to believe could happen. So
yeah.
But they didn't happen, did it? And part of me thinks the zombie programming is not there to say that humans will one day end up being turned into zombies through some malicious scientific means. I feel like it's a mockery of the concept of resurrection. I feel like it's the Satanists kind of poking fun at the Christian idea of resurrection, the resurrected saints, the resurrected dead, who rule with Christ for 1,000 years in a sense. It could also, it's pretty metaphorical as well for the state of mind people are in today. We practically are zombies, people glued to the phones, have no free thought whatsoever, just follow the whims of their impulses and desires, their base impulses and desires. So there's all that as well. So I don't know. Could it be a subtle reference to the Nephilim are going to return, and we're just showing it through the symbol of a zombie in our movies, I don't know, but I would be weary to jump on the bandwagon of they're going to turn us into zombies, man, through the thing they've put in us or something. I don't think it's as simple as that. Demonic possession is real. It's possible that we could be zombie-like, rage virus-like. If you want to go off 28 days later, if suddenly there's a mass possession event. But to make that happen, I mean, you would have to fully corrupt all humans. So you think you know where I'm going here, to the point where it's no longer feasible that the Holy Spirit can dwell within it, and therefore only demons can dwell in that vessel. So then it's go ahead for full possession time, maybe. These things were wild, cannibalistic beasts when they were on the earth. So if you're possessed by the spirit of this thing, then you're going to go around acting like a cannibalistic zombie, aren't you? So there is that angle you could go down. But again, I feel like it's more of a fear campaign and a mockery of resurrection and the concept of resurrection than it actually is a real threat to humanity. I know there's channels out there. What's his name? Daydreamers. Have you seen him before? And he
Probably.
has this thing called the plasma apocalypse. And it's his idea that there's a cyclical apocalypse every now and then where the poles shift
Yep.
in our dome reality. And that moment where there's a gap in energy, things come down from the sky, everything gets psychedelic and weird. The people start becoming zombies in some cases. The dead resurrect because of the energies that are just everywhere, charging everything. People get superpowers and it becomes a madness for like a period of time before it locks back in place again and everything comes back to normality. And there's that chaos period. It's like shaking a snow globe type of period, you know what I mean? And then giant creatures come down from space because there's no longer a barrier protecting us from the waters above, and these, you know, and it becomes psychedelic and crazy. True Cronenberg stuff starts happening, you know what I mean? Phantazoids, he calls them. So, but again, there's always been people out there saying this type of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not fully putting the guy's theories down. I've watched him. I think it's entertaining and great too, and fun to speculate for sure. Because anything's game for me now. Because I don't even know where I am in the timeline, you know. So it's kind of I'm not going to throw out any possibility for future apocalyptic events at all. I'm going to take them all as a serious possibility because there's evidences for all sorts of ways it could go down, and
Yeah.
maybe the zombie thing is just one of them. It's just one of them. It's one of the many bullets they've got in the magazine, you know, that they could fire. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that about you, that you are so open-minded, and also, you know, you really do exercise humility. You know, you're very well researched, but even still, yeah, if guys, if any researcher is honest with you, we don't know for sure, right? And I found the more I learn, the less I really know. And I really appreciate that. I think that attitude permeates all of your work. You know, you're bringing very interesting concepts. You're not afraid to, you know, kind of dig into them more and to speculate, but with honesty that, hey, I could be totally wrong here, but you know, and
Well, yeah.
and also like the movie They Live has become really popular, almost like a cult classic now. For a while, nobody knew about it. When I watched it, I was shocked because it was very similar to what I kind of saw in our world, right? In terms of how the world really works, that veil being lifted and kind of a spirit realm, and our realm being like a thin veil that only a few can see. Funny enough, like I think there's a lot of truth in that movie. You know, John Carpenter, when interviewed, just said, "Oh, it was just about Republicans." And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so I wonder how much of it is this kind of you know, revelation of the method as we've discussed, or you know, almost this like Akashic record, you know, information in the ether kind of thing, where people are able to pull from these themes that we know to be true, even if they don't, you know, really themselves believe it. It's kind of in the air somehow. Maybe it's in their genetic code. I don't know, but we see a lot of the themes that you're discussing covered throughout, you know, sci-fi movies from the beginning of time. So I think there's definitely something there.
Oh yeah, yeah. The whole revelation of the method thing, I think, is involved with that as well. I think it's the idea of if they can reveal to us through a drip-feed method of the truth of our reality, we'll be more passive and blasé about it when the reality actually comes to fruition, and when they reveal themselves to be what they truly are. It's predictive programming at its finest, I would say. But you'll find the same themes get told in these films through different stylistic choices. You could either be zombies, vampires, pick your aliens, pick your monster. You know what I mean? But it's the underlying themes behind all these that you should be paying attention to. What's the result of the invading monster? Is it all humanity comes together as one under some kind of new globalized utopic system or something like that? You know, it's yeah, they're playing with our mind on such a magical, deep, occult level, and that's what magic really is. At the end of the day, it's influence through media and through words and symbols and signs.
Yep.
You know, and
Yeah.
you got to be careful.
Very, very well said. And you did, I think, a series of videos on the Book of Enoch, and I do really appreciate you bringing that to light more. A lot of Christians are kind of afraid of the Book of Enoch. I think there's a lot of gravy in there. Um, One of your videos, you kind of almost have a slide spreadsheet where you talk about all of the powers or knowledge that these different Nephilim or entities gave us, right? It's like astrology, genetics, writing pen and paper, modern language. Um, yeah, but could you maybe walk us through that in the context of the Book of Enoch? Like, what are these guys teaching us? And I know that's the springboard for what you say. Then they formed secret societies as well. So maybe you could dig in a bit deeper there.
Sure. I'm not sure what video you're referring to be honest, because maybe
Okay.
it's buried under a lot of other videos. But yeah, they'd certainly taught us a lot of things during their time on Earth, and I'm trying to find the section of my book now where it talks about this time where the angels decided to start messing with us and teaching us all these things. I think it comes under the chapter utter corruption. Yeah, I'm talking about the rebellion, the utter corruption. Yeah, so I've got okay, so I'll read a section of the book that just covers that point. So this is just a page here, and I'll just go through because I've already got it, the quote from the Book of Enoch in this section, so it means I've got it exactly word for word verbatim here, so it make a lot more sense. So let me just quickly find a good jumping off point to get into this. So I give a description of just how horrible the antediluvian age is, and I'll just jump off from the end of that description. So it says, this would just be another day in the late antediluvian epoch. All men's hearts were filled with nothing but evil continuously. The everyday person would live their days ruled by tyrannical, monstrous giants who often brutalized their own subjects, and they weren't warring with neighboring civilizations, slaughtering their Nephilim brothers and sisters in petty power struggles, or even battling the very gods, angels that created them. Meanwhile, the occult religious leaders of the dragon cults would be imposing a Nephilim fallen angel worship religion upon you, making sure no heretical worship of a singular creator god was taking place. The warring giants and the serpent cult purges left nothing but utter devastation of all land, leaving the surviving humans to suffer in the ruins left behind. Lawlessness and murder wasn't simply a choice, but the only way to survive for many. The knowledge passed down to mankind from the gods, the rebellious angels, had been abused, and perverted to the point where everyone had changed themselves into power-hungry magicians or genetically enhanced warriors. Much of the original knowledge in regards to the nature of reality had been occulted into serpent cults and secret societies led by the children of Cain, their only intentions being to corrupt God's creation in blasphemous revenge for being exiled and marked. The leaders of these cults disseminated corrupt knowledge to the masses as the ordained religious preachers of the day. These cult leaders upheld the lie that the pantheons of angels were the true gods. Chimera hybrids of God's original creations were running rampant as the pets and weapons of the Nephilim rulers. Many humans had also changed their bodies into new and bizarre forms through the power of the angels and their supernatural abilities. This utter decay and chaos of the time was made clear in the first book of the Bible, Genesis 6:11 through 13. Quote, and the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. As we can see, the works of the Watchers caused so much destruction upon the earth that God saw it fit to perform a full reset on all his creation. The Book of the Watchers, the first 36 chapters of the Book of Enoch, explains in great detail the many evil deeds of the Watchers and the resulting carnage of their actions. Let's examine the complete Book of Enoch Standard English Version, chapter 3, verses 7 through 14. Quote, and all the others together with them took up into themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go into them and defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments and the cuttings of roots, and made them acquainted with the plants. And they became pregnant, and they bore great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. So they drank the blood, killed each other. We read that earlier, didn't we? Then it goes on to say, Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working with them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all colouring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, Armorus the resolving of enchantments. Barakajal taught astrology, Kokobel the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, Araquel the signs of the earth, Shamziel the signs of the sun, Sariel, the course of the moon, and as men perished they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. So there you go. That's a list of what they taught mankind bit by bit. And as you can see, it's basically what could be considered simple to us today, you know. And I think people don't realize what simple detrimental effects simple types of knowledge and abilities can have on humanity. So it doesn't mention here, for example, that it was Cain who introduced weights and measures to humanity, something he learned from his father Adam, who he learned from God, you know. And when you introduce the concept of measure to a society that doesn't understand things like borders or property, you corrupt them instantly, because you've just given the concept of ownership. I have divided the lands. This is mine, not yours. You know, that type of thought process begins, and that's where sin and covetousness begins to seep in, just from a simple act of learning how to measure things. You know, and this, again, what the angels taught humans were very simple. How to use colors and makeup to beautify yourself and ordain yourself with stones. Now that alone is simple. People say, oh, that's teaching women how to seduce men, and it's all about sex and fornication. I don't think it was that simple, because my research has shown that dressing a certain way opens up channels. If you dress like a clown, you're channeling the demons, you know. And I think teaching mankind how to dress like certain things and paint their faces in certain ways in order to connect with the spirit realm in specific ways is what was being taught there. Heavenly knowledge, you know, how the spirit realm works. And that still goes on today. That's a practice still used today by these ancient ancestor spirit worship cults in isolated places all over the earth and every continent, you know. And then Azazel taught men metallurgy, how to get a stone, use incredible heat to melt the stone, to get the ore from it in order to refine that ore and then pour it out and turn it into metal. Now, that's a very complex process that mankind would not probably have figured out on their own. But they taught this simple thing, that which seems like nothing to us today, you know, very basic stuff to us today to do that. But to them, that means, oh, well, now we can make weapons. Now we can be trained in the art of war. And the Nephilim were mighty warriors. That's what they were known for. You know, their skills in war, their proficiency in speed and brutality in war. You know, their abilities to just absolutely decimate their enemies through being taught these things by the angels. How to harness resources from the earth and use them for your own personal gain, basically. So, you know, these are examples which show how they can become practically used. But the basic knowledge is metallurgy. The basic knowledge is art, the mixing of colors. You know, the basic thing, the teaching is root cutting, how to make medicine, pharmakia, the combining of one root with another to create a specific compound chemical, which you can then use to give yourself the ability to heal and or power of some kind. Something we take for granted today, but this is knowledge that was given to us from a higher corrupted source at the end of the day. You know, and we live in this world that uses all of these things openly. Yeah. And we have to realize that, you know, it's simple stuff. Astrology, you know, watching the stars, the wandering stars, in order to predict your future. Things like that, you know, which is basically communicating with fallen angels, you know, and by venerating them. It's magic in its purest form. It's creating channels. They basically taught mankind how to interact with the spirit realm for personal gain, not to be in communion with God.
Yeah, I want to speak to astrology specifically for a second. So I believe Genesis 1:14, God said, "Let there be light, lights in the heaven and the expanse of the heavens to separate day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years." Right? There's
Hmm.
this concept that the stars are your way to read the heavens. You see that theme throughout the Bible. And then also, I've listened to a lot of talks on astrotheology, and I find that pretty fascinating. I think some of it's pretty weak sauce, to be honest, but some of it's very interesting. If you read a lot of the stories of the Bible and the New Testament, it does point to this almost allegory of, what the event they're describing happening at a certain time or event when the ox or the Capricorn is mentioned, and then
Yeah.
resolving, and then tracking that back to the actual zodiac seems to track pretty well. So I'd be curious to know, yeah, your thoughts on astrology. Like, it does seem in some ways encouraged both in the Old Testament and kind of pointed at by Jesus, and then also in the New Testament, it seems that some of these stories really are astrological stories.
Yeah. Well, there's astronomy and astrology. There's two things. I think God intended that science to be understood in terms of astronomy. Use it for signs and seasons to predict the future, patterns and weather to help you grow your food. Practical uses to understanding the signs and seasons through the clock he's put into the sky for you, which is what the moon and the sun and the stars are used for. And we do use them for that. Astrology is to subjectively read into them in order to divine or divinate some kind of information from it. It's highly subjective Gnostic stuff. It wasn't the original intention of what those things are supposed to be used for. It's a corruption or a perversion of a sacred science. So it became astrology, and then there's a difference between using the stars for signs and seasons and worshipping them. Big difference, and that's what basically happened. Now, I'm dubious. I've heard the astrotheological stories that basically the idea that Jesus was just a metaphor for the sun comes from. Okay, that's nonsense. There is no more historical documentation for the existence of a person than there is Jesus Christ. Okay, and when people say, well, the Bible's not valid, it's a history book, whether you like it or not. Okay, it's there. He was a real human being. He wasn't a metaphor for the sun. But I do like, what did I mention at the start of this? Many angels who are stars left their first estate with the sole intention of corrupting humanity and confusing us, making God's creation, his plan, difficult. So I don't trust any of these star signs, any of these constellations, any of this. We're moving from one season of Aquarius into Capricorn, this type of talk, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what the Bible is really talking about, the ages of man, going through these things, and it was not really about real people. I think, well, yeah, you can make that interpretation if you want to trust the corruption that's been made on the earth by this rebellion that took place from stars, which are angels.
Yeah.
I don't trust any of it. There shouldn't even be wandering stars, which we call planets, which are a huge part of astrology, which we depend on for the cycles, and it's when is they call it Saturn rising or something like that, when every 27 they say there's a part of chaos in your life every 27 years when Saturn's in your star sign, and it's all this type of, is it Saturn ascending or something? I don't know. But the point is, it's like to use the planets to then divine what you should do next is to give yourself over to rebellious angels. That's literally what the Bible, if you want to go by the Bible on this, that's what it's telling you you're doing, and which is why you shouldn't be doing that. You should not be living your life by what the planets tell you based on their position in that respect, because yeah.
Yeah, and you see the controllers very much using astrology, right? A lot of the Black Swan events happen on the same times and dates. And then if you do a little research, you see that, everywhere from the Queen to all these people had like super high ranking astrologists that, told them when to go to war and when to enact a policy and when to do, X thing. And I find that very fascinating. To what degree maybe there is like I've heard the theme of the sky clock, where a lot of our future is actually baked into the sky, right? And as we move through it, it's almost like the hermetic principle of as above, so below. I also think a lot of astrologists are just brutal to even listen to at all.
Mhm.
And then you see these people in positions of power taking it very, very seriously. So I wonder, to what degree is there actually a real phenomenon happening here, or they're just following it and they have all the power, so then they do it as like a weird cult. Yeah.
I don't think it's God's clock anymore. I think they're following the clock of the angels in rebellion who have mapped it out in the sky, and they're following their plan and their timings and how they want to do things. Don't forget, where are we in the timeline now? This has to be up for speculation, and it can kind of square this issue. Because people were saying, you could see that in Virgo, the moon was in a specific position, and this is talked about in Revelations, where she would have the moon at her feet and all this type of stuff. So we must be hearing Revelations right now because the signs are in the stars above. As above, so below. Well, as above, so below is not a biblical concept.
Yep.
It's an occult concept. Yep. At the end of the day, this is a corrupted, fallen earth, because there's a rebellion going on that we're in the midst of, where angels have left their first estate. Okay, so don't trust anything that's in the sky. And if you want to go off an as above, so below principle, I think if you want to make a godly version of that, not the corrupted version, it doesn't mean what's in the sky is happening on earth. It means what goes on in the spiritual realm is a mirror of what's happening in the physical realm. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the godly interpretation, which has been twisted into, no, look to the skies. Everyone look up. You need to look at the stars, and look at the physical world, and we can tell what's going to happen through the signs in the physical world. And it's kind of like, we're not supposed to keep our eye on the physical world. We're supposed to keep our eye on spiritual things. We're supposed to keep our eyes on God, and follow his plan for us, not what the stars have mapped out for us. And astrology is not meant to be what it's used for today. You can use it as a useful tool for basic stuff, okay, as like a signs and seasons situation. Okay, you can use it to help you sail. Okay, you can use it, follow, use the North Star as a compass, things like that. You know what I mean? It is a useful tool, but it is not something to be used for magical purposes to map your entire life out on, in terms of predicting the best prosperous route or something like. And this is where the perversion of God. This is what Enoch did. Enoch did these things. He took the sciences learned from Adam to Cain and perverted them, occulted them, and used them and twisted them to gain power over people through his secrets. Today it's different, and they drip feed to the profane masses their religions and package them with new names to audiences, so they can start following their religions too. And this is where this whole astrotheological stuff comes from. It's ancient, and it's still a lie. It was a lie then, and it's a lie now. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, because I looked into it. Some of it I found very interesting, and then other stuff I was like, that seems pretty bunk. And so, yeah, I really appreciate your perspective on that. Where to go now? So I want to talk about, I want to get your understanding of, so we've kind of come up to the point where the flood happens, a lot of the Nephilim and their descendants have died, and now they are disembodied spirits. Maybe some of them were still alive in human form due to their, ability to survive the flood, either going below or above the surface. Some of them split to other places throughout the world, perhaps, and started their own kind of kingdoms. But so then take us forward there. So if the flood occurs, all of humanity is wiped out, less some Nephilim. Was there a restarting of the human race? Are we all descendants of the Nephilim that survived the flood? What's going on here?
It's a mix of everything. There's no one answer. It's a mystery as well, and some things are going to have to be a mystery because there wasn't much being documented during that time, so we have to piece it together based on what we have. Obviously Noah's sons brought their wives with them, so a lot less incest was going on than necessary, I think, in that respect. There is ways you could square it off, but there would have been some kind of weird cousin thing going on, but there's plenty of repopulation events in the earth where humans did mix themselves with hybrid humans instead as well. So, and then eventually they all would have met, and then crossbreeding would have happened. So in a sense, it does seem evident that yes, there is true corruption of all flesh now, but it's so watered down you can't actually see it. You wouldn't be able to distinguish who has Nephilim blood in them and who doesn't. It's likely we all have traces of that corruption in with us. And this is perhaps where disease comes from, people have argued, and why we have decaying bodies that aren't perfect and have a serious problem. It's because this corruption, which from the antediluvian age kind of seeps its way in, but it's to such a minute level that we can still live lives and we can be born again. And Jesus gave us the ability to cast out demons and heal ourselves of sickness. So it's that kind of, the solution was given in that way, but it's kind of why at the end of it all there needs to be a new heaven and earth, a new creation, a recreation, and the resurrection of people's souls in new divine flesh bodies as they originally were intended to be before the fall of Adam. I think that's the whole full circle story of the Bible, is what it's trying to get back to. How do we get back to a state where we're Adam in Eden again before the fall? God has a plan to do that. It's the entire book of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. That is the plan. That's the point of the story at the end of the day. But in terms of the Nephilim immediately after flood, like I said, there was this whole culling going on. It seems like they all gathered into one spot, which was the lands of Canaan, probably because they knew this is the land where the Savior would come from. They probably had some privy knowledge from their parents and forefathers, and they were still working in a spiritual hierarchy. They were still communicating with their disembodied brethren. You know what I mean? They were all working together. The rebellion never stopped. It's just the methods they had to change, But they all knew to come to this promised land, and that's where they dwelt, and that's where they were being kicked out of and killed, and where the wars were happening with Israel, who had just left their slavery in Egypt and were given this edict to go forth and reclaim these lands full of giants. But I do believe many fled and scattered and didn't create civilizations after this, I don't think. Maybe some of them took advantage of pockets of small tribes and did their best to make themselves positions or petty kings and tyrants, kind of, because they were very different in terms of power and stature to other people. But it seems like in more modern occurrences where people encounter something reminiscent of a Nephilim giant, they're like tribes, small tribes in the middle of isolated areas. They kind of had to go a bit more underground and hidden. The giant of Kandahar, for example, was this thing that came out of a cave randomly. They weren't out in the open in their own village or city living a prosperous life. They were living like an animal in a cave. I think that's the kind of the consequence of most of the giants after the flood. You have plenty of accounts of North American tribes having to deal with red-haired, white-skinned, long-necked, cannibalistic giants. And they weren't like 50 foot tall. They were like 12 foot tall or 10 foot tall, like diluted. They weren't the original ones, but they were still, you had to look up at them still, but they weren't like enormous, but they were tall enough that the humans could war with them and win. You get what I mean? So it was a bit a different time, but these encounters, it's like they migrated and just settled somewhere in the middle of a rainforest thinking no one will find us here. Then when humans inevitably find them, they start playing with the humans like the toys. That's always the story these Indian tribes come up with in Americas. The famous one is the Nung Nung tribes that had to deal with the Duwamish people. So the Duwamish tribes are the humans that dwelt there in North America, in the North American plains. And they had this tribe just across the river they called them the Nung Nungs. And they were giants. They were pale-skinned, red-haired, but they had a sick sense of humor about them. Kind of an irreverence. They didn't really take life seriously or care much for anything other than themselves. They were very full of pride, very much the epitome of a Nephilim attitude and creature, you know what I mean? Right. And it's kind of like they were on holiday. It's like they were in this place, but they were on holiday. They didn't really belong there, and they knew that, you know what I mean? But they settled in this place, and while we're here, let's have some fun with these people over there, And they would come into the tribes of the Duwamish and just mess with them, like just steal clothes off the washing line or put things on really tall places they can't reach and laugh about it, or come during their ceremonies at night and tell really horrible, vulgar genitalia related jokes while wafting their own genitalia around. That was huge, you know what I mean? Just doing things that the tribes would be like, this is disgusting and horrible, but what are we supposed to do? They're huge. What can we actually? And they knew it. Oh, what are these people going to do? What are they going to do? We're massive, you know what I mean? They can't do anything. It's just a bit of fun. We're like playthings to them, and that's what this Duwamish tribe was talking about. And they still have this oral tradition today where they talk about the encounter with these giants. And these giants kept stealing women. some women would come back, some wouldn't, and they would basically stories of, we're talking about rape and cannibalism here, you know what I mean? They would eat people and things like that. And one day, the chief stood up to them and said, "You can't keep doing this. You have to stop." That's all he did. Just verbally chastised them. Say, "Please stop doing this to us. You have to stop doing this to us. Like, this isn't fair." Because they were peaceful people, you know what I mean? They didn't want a war or anything. And what are they supposed to do about giants anyway, But the story goes that as soon as the giants heard the humans say this, they snapped. And they were quickly like, "Who the hell is this pathetic, puny insect thinking he can talk to me like that?" And then the giants decimated the tribe, killed all the men, just ripped their heads off, chucked them above the tree canopies and let the bodies fall and splatter on the floor, wiped them out, just wiped them out. And they never recovered from that. And that's a story they still tell to this day, and in fear of the Nung Nungs, it's kind of, you don't. And I thought it was funny, they're like jokers. They were like clowns. They acted like clowns with irreverence, Not only did they look like clowns, but they acted like it too. But this is a relatively modern oral tradition story of giants who somehow settled in this spot and just made life hell for those people. There's another stories, the city car, who warred with them and won and killed them, trapped them in a cave, blocked up the cave, set fire to the entrance of the cave, smoked them out and gassed them to death. Right? They won. They killed those giants. And then there's stories of this cave in the 1800s being dug out and trying to harness bat feces because it's apparently valuable. And under all the bat feces, he found the skeletons of these giants, which corroborated the myths of the city car killing these giants. You know what I mean? It's like all matched up. And then lo and behold, the Smithsonian comes in and snatches all those skeletons up, and you never see them ever again. But
they'd never do that.
No, well, that's basically the entire story of the 1800s. It's just giant skeletons being uncovered everywhere, and then all of them vanish.
Yeah,
like it's just news article after news article. Yeah.
Yeah, man. They just like dip in. They're like, "Nope, no giants here. See ya, bye."
It's like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't match the evolutionary theory. Get rid of it.
Yeah.
That's basically what it was. That's what was going on. That's literally what was happening at the time. It was like, that doesn't match our current understanding of the chronology of time. Just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Just hide it.
I know. Yeah.
But the hundreds of news articles from many different states all over the country talking about giants being uncovered by reputable archaeologists as well, not just nobodies. Like people of the day who were well known as and reputable and serious, weren't making stuff up, weren't trying to do it for clout. You know what I mean? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these articles were uncovering giant skeletons everywhere, just everywhere. So they made it everywhere. It wasn't just in the Middle East, in what we call Canaan. They made it all over the place, but they all got killed. So if there's any remnants around today, they must be either look very human now because they've hybridized with us and bred with us and watered down the bloodline so much that you couldn't even tell the difference, or they're just hidden. Maybe they went underground, or maybe they're in caves, or maybe the numbers are just so tiny and so few that, they're being protected by people who run the world, who even believe themselves to be descendants of angels, have the divine right to rule, that we have Nephilim blood in us, therefore we should have dominion over mankind. I believe a lot of that's still going on today. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but they certainly believe it's true.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And one thing that I think is a bit ambiguous from your research is that, at least for me, I haven't watched all of your content, unfortunately, but is you make a very good case about clowns, and clown-like creatures being fairly accurately represented in these diverse cultures, right? When they venerate them almost as gods, right? And so I'm curious, like, to what extent is that happening because they actually physically saw these beings that were Nephilim post-flood that were just in and around their areas, and that tradition is carried on, versus them, like, tapping into something kind of in the spirit realm through, ritual that's leading them towards that,
It's both. And you see, I'm starting to realize in my own research, you can distinguish the two as well. Which tribe is dressing that way because they've seen them in their psychedelic form in the spirit realm? Which tribe is dressing that way because they lived with them once and have a memory? and
Mm.
it's a bit of everything, to be honest.
Oh wow.
Um, you'll find the less psychedelic ones look more like a clown. The ones who I think the ones who actually experience them in the physical have the most clown-looking costume, white skin, some kind of red headdress, whether it be feathers or some kind of red nose, multicolored face paints, polka dots or something like that, and they have like patterned clothing. Okay, I think they actually probably did live at one point among them and have a memory of them and just try and recreate it over and over again through an emulation cycle with the same intention to connect with them in the spirit realm because they consider them their ancestor spirits now. So it's the same reasoning, but the ones that look more clownish, like circus clownish, I think had more of a visual memory, which they've kept in that tradition, and they're passing down through generations. Then you have some tribes, as a lot of shamanistic tribes, shall we say, who are trying to represent the creatures they see through the drugs. And you'll find the way they dress is multicolored psychedelic patterned ribbons, bells, tassels, just waving hair, tussled costumes. They whiz themselves round in these costumes that create like an ethereal light wave wafty effect, and they're trying to recreate something spiritual they've seen. There's a distinction, but aesthetically it's similar. It's very similar. Less human form, more object form. That you'll find that they were things that make them look not human at all, that elongate features to astronomical proportions and create shapes and forms which are just unhuman but human-like, kind of, you know what I mean? But the ones that are more human-looking, I think, are direct memory representations of physical beings. But the
Wow.
more psychedelic, out there, inhuman ones, I think they are the spiritual representation. Because as somebody who's done the psychedelics, I can see where they got their inspiration from. I get it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, I know what you're trying to do there. Like, you can't recreate it with stuff because it's a different realm, but it's a good try. I see it often. You know what I mean? He's like, yeah, okay, guys, I see what you're doing. So it's a bit of both. It really is.
Wow, man, that's fantastic answer. Thank you for that. And just along that vein, I think you paint pretty much every culture that depicts these clown-like creatures as a veneration or a worship. But I wonder, for some of them, is it actually just almost like a Mexican Day of the Dead type situation where they're like, hey, we know these things exist. This is us portraying them to show that we've overcome them or that we're just acknowledging their presence. Do you think it's always a case of actual worship of these creatures versus just acknowledgement of their existence?
It's rarely acknowledgement. I admit I don't know much about the Day of the Dead ritual. Maybe I need to do some research into that one. But what I found, it comes into either two camps. Either it's veneration or it's apotropaic in nature, which means to ward away or to scare.
Mm.
They're trying to trick spirits into leaving them alone. So it's the other one. I see that, fear or veneration. It's one of the two. Okay. But the funny thing is they do the exact same thing as each other. They dress like them. They dress like demons. Some dress like them because they want to be possessed by them. And that's why they do it. There's no other reason for them to do it. They're literally saying, I'm a shaman. I am a channel for spirits. I dress this way in order to create a stronger connection to the spirit realm so they can possess me. And then the tribe can ask me questions and the spirit can answer. They tell you that's why I dress this way. I dress this way to be possessed by my ancestors. Okay, they're very open about it. The Theym in India will tell you that's what they're doing, for example. It's just one example of thousands, But that's why they do it. Then you have these other cultures who dress like demons and wear masks like demons, do the exact same thing, but they believe I dress this way to scare spirits away or ward them off or kind of in a way appease them. Even another option, they believe what they're doing is trickery of some kind, which in some way protects the village. So they put visages of demons around the village in order to keep demons from coming in, something like that. You know what I mean? It's like but who's right? Who's right here? Like, they can't both be right. They're in complete contradiction with the result that they're after there, but they do the exact same practice. I'm more inclined to believe the original shamans are correct. You dress like a thing to channel the thing. You're not scaring away a demon by dressing like one. No chance. Mm-hmm. Demons, give them some credit. They've been around for thousands of years. They've learned a thing or two. They're not stupid. Don't be naive, you know. And again, I'm not trying to like put down. I know there's hundreds of cultures that do this and really believe it, but I'm just saying from my research and from my outsider perspective, are you certain that practice you're doing is actually keeping demons away? Are you certain? Really think about it, you know. That's all I'm trying to say there.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
And so, the funny thing, so I've gone down a lot of rabbit holes lately, as you say, and one with respect to demons in terms of a biblical context has been raised to me by Bruce McDonald, who I've had on my show a few times now, and he stated that he believes there was actually a split in Judaism in the Old Testament during the time of King Solomon. So King Solomon actually discusses that he built the Temple of Solomon using the power of 33 demons that he had learned. And so Bruce MacDonald had postulated through his research that it seems that something taught King Solomon this kind of similar manipulation of the dark arts, or the occult, if you will, right? Because, in the New Testament, Jesus does say, like, demons will have no power over you, but at no point are we talking about, manipulating demons to perform work, right? That is not something that Jesus would advocate for. So I'd be curious, have you heard of this kind of theory? And how do you think that ties into a lot of the concepts?
Well, I've researched a lot about King Solomon through my research into Freemasonry. They love King Solomon.
Yep.
They consider him the first master builder.
Correct.
One of the first, anyway. Nimrod is also one of the first as well. It depends how far back you want to go, but the first. Yep. But in terms of like working with the spirit realm to gain earthly power, I mean, that story of King Solomon is right up there, and that's basically what the Freemasons are all about, even though they don't talk about it. There's other stories as well, that there was Hiram Abiff, which was an architect who worked with King Solomon to help him build the temple too. There's that too, and it was orchestrated with Hiram Abiff's help to design the temple. And then there's a whole demon aspect, which is another belief and story that was involved in the process as well. The story of Hiram Abiff is interesting because this is a ritual third-degree Freemasons have to do. They have to recreate the killing of Hiram Abiff, the murder of Hiram Abiff. And basically he had all the knowledge. And I think it was 3 men came and said to him, "Tell us your secrets." And he said no, and was beaten to death and took the secret to his grave. And that's the point. It's kind of like, you have to take our secrets to death. So we're going to recreate the ritual of Hiram Abiff dying, so you can learn that you must keep the secrets of our craft unto death. And the punishment for not doing that is, we will kill you. Basically, if they don't kill you, we will. You're going to die either way if it comes to that, Yeah. But they're obsessed with rebuilding Solomon's temple, especially during the early 20th century. And they were just before the Great Depression, and so the late 19th century as well. Well, there was money everywhere, They were just building Solomon Temple after Solomon Temple after Solomon Temple all over America. They were obsessed with it. They were obsessed with this story, like you were telling, of having control over the demons through the magic of the ring, the Lord of the Ring, And they even gave that analog into their own rituals within the lodges as well. So the Grand Worshipful Master is the leader of the ritual within a lodge, and these lodges are basically Solomon Temple analogs. That's the whole point of them. It's trying to recreate that history of the first Mason, the first builder, the first person who mastered the arcane knowledge in order to use it to build a perfect temple to their god. So that's basically what they're obsessed with doing. And it's funny because, like I said, they were building all these Solomon-like temples in this time. Then the economic crash happened, and they stopped doing it so much because no one had any money to do that kind of thing anymore. And even in the circuses, you'll find that you have the ringmaster of a circus who orchestrates the clowns, which is the demons, which I've told you in my own work. This disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. So symbolically speaking, a ringmaster dresses in an identical fashion to the Grand Worshipful Master of a lodge. Yep. The Grand Worshipful Master of a lodge is supposed to be Solomon. That's who he's trying to be. And the ring master in a circus is Solomon, who's using his power of the ring to control the show and to create this ritual, this thing out of it. So yeah, the story is interesting because he uses the ring and he gets the demons, doesn't he, to tell him how they work and how they function. How do you afflict pain on the world? You know what I mean? And it's funny because they're very simple things. I can't remember now, but it's things like I'm the one that caused, and this probably isn't true because it's been a while since I read it, but it's stuff like I'm the one that causes a tickly cough at the back of your throat. It's like simple stuff. These demons have petty roles to play in like annoying people. You know what I mean? And I haven't got the book to hand, so I can't give a direct example. To be honest, I'm working off memory here, but
Yeah.
how demons work according to that book is so subtle and sneaky and
Yes.
weird, isn't it? Like, and he goes, I think maybe there is some insight there, but at the same time, Solomon shouldn't have been doing that. no wonder the Freemason. He has a bad crowd follows after him. Is what I'm saying. Like, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I really found it interesting. I've dug into it on a few streams with Bruce, and that's kind of his postulation, is that at that point it kind of split between like Torah adherents and, hey, we have this new, blood magic type technology, and then that kind of split, and then we're still living through this era where that type of blood magic is being used on a global or cosmic scale, and that's where we're finding ourselves now, is kind of the end
Yeah.
times of that being finally exposed for what it was. Yeah, I just
Could that be what Jesus repeatedly said in Revelations? Those who call themselves Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Could that perhaps be a reference to that
Yep.
line of thinking? And even people say, well, you're talking about Kabbalah here, aren't you? But the term Kabbalah didn't actually appear till the 1500s.
Correct.
So it was called something else prior to that, and it's mysteries. It's the mystery wisdoms. It's the mystery schools. King Solomon was the first master of the mysteries. He is. We've the Freemasons based their entire structure and organization upon because of that idea. So, yeah, it comes in many names and forms, but its sources are all documented in the Bible. Yep. It's all there. It's all in the history. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And yeah, Bruce was the one who, or also CJB and Bruce both illuminated this concept that Freemasonry is simply just Jewish mysticism for Gentiles. And if you look through a lot of, and then if you even go into Jewish mysticism, it's like Babylonian level stuff, right? Egyptian occult. It's very fascinating stuff. Okay, I know we've been on for 2 hours. I had a couple more for you because I want to be respectful. I'm sure you're very still suffering a little. I've heard you talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and you talk about how this could be a mechanism by which the Nephilim are brought into, either a mass possession event or somehow able to, I guess, interact with us. Maybe we could kind of pivot there in terms of what are your thoughts on AI and how do you think it ties into the Nephilim?
It's funny because I made a video basically where it was just focusing strictly on AI and the fears people have about it's a means for them to communicate with us through ChatGPT. You're actually talking to demons, people say, or people say like, oh, the AI are going to take all of our jobs away from us and make us obsolete or something like that. There's many varying fears of AI in its current form. I came at it from, you need to think more future projection here. Okay. I don't want to go around I don't go around saying you're talking to demons when you use artificial intelligence now. I feel like those kind of knee-jerk reactions and statements don't make us look good in the long run and don't make us seem like critical thinkers in the long run. I think it's still just technology right now designed by man. Okay. And there's definitely some kind of spiritual influence behind it. Don't get me wrong. Just like everything that was taught to us, has been taught to us in some respect, just like the angels taught simple things back then. Even the complicated things, I think, are being inspired by the same rebellion and the same information being taught to us from heavenly places. Sure. But I think the long-term plan is what we see right now for AI is this infancy form. They're testing neurons right now because they're trying to build a brain. trying to build an artificial brain of some kind that is akin or equal to this thing inside here, which is God created and perfect and brilliant. It's our processing powers are ridiculous when you actually understand the capacity of what goes on in here. It's not simple to mimic, but I think AI is a stepping stone to get to that ability to recreate a human brain of some kind. So I'm not consciousness necessarily, though they could feign that through AI technology. But what AI is essentially doing is it's pretending to be a human, and it's firing its own fake neurons in this holographic projected brain and building neural networks and pathways within this holographic brain by acting like a human. So it's trying to make this holographic synthetic brain react as though a human would react to stimuli by doing it and communicating with us right now, back and forth. So AI can make a convincing human now. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to, because what you need to make a brain that's like a human's, that can house consciousness, you need to train it to have the neurons and the capabilities of a human brain. And how do you do that? Well, you create AI and let it run its neural network pathways and go out there in the world and interact with real humans and learn. But all this is doing is making this synthetic, holographic, perhaps, brain more compatible and usable as a house for consciousness. Because this is the aim of transhumanism. How can we get this into a machine so we can live forever? That's the promise, isn't it? So transhumanism is, it wants to build the body to house consciousness. AI is the brain for that body, which will house our consciousness. That's the promise anyway. The promise is that we get to have all this stuff. We don't get to have all this stuff. The real plan is, let's build bodies that will not house the Holy Spirit so the Nephilim can come back again. And that's what I think is really going on here. We're seeing the testing of individual neurons to recreate a brain which can house the consciousness of the Nephilim once they master the robotics, which will house this brain, to create gods among the earth once more, as it was in the days of Noah, to bring these spirits back into physical form. It's not going to be like it was. They're not going to be giants anymore. They're going to be our robot overlords. That's basically how it's going to go this time. But it's the same spirit behind it. That's my theory.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot in that. I think kind of everything's the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. I kind of like that because with AI, I think it's not nearly where people think it is. In some ways it's highly impressive and scary. In other ways, I don't think it's anywhere near they say. But then at the same time, I honestly think a lot of how the world is been controlled and how, where we've been going, the paths we've been going down, I think a lot of it feels not just anti-human, but robotic. I wonder if we plugged almost the whole world, financial system, telecommunication system, all interlinked together. I think a lot of what we're seeing is literally some type of foreign consciousness or like robotic element at the helm, right? We know this in the stock market, for example. It's like 95% of trades are all robots, and then even on the internet, 70% of people are bots, right? And then traffic on the internet, so I kind of think maybe they plugged in the machine a long time ago, to some degree.
Well,
I don't know.
Someone said something very interesting the other day. We had this. When was the year we switched from analog to digital? When was that? Can we remember that? I'm going to look that up now.
In the stock market, it was 1972. Like for stock trading.
Analog to digital year. I'm just trying to think when that time period was for us to switch from analog to digital in terms of technology, because I think that was really the time when that consciousness could really come into because analog was the testing of synapses and the nervous system to introduce digital to the world, wasn't it? Yeah. And now digital, it's testing the synapses and rebuilding the rudimentary nervous system of the coming AI overlord system, which will overtake digital. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I think it's step by step. And I just find obviously this digital for me, does appear to have more of an ethereal nature to it than analog. Obviously, analog was more mechanical.
Yep.
This is more gooey and weird and wavy and and crossing over, just like the spirit realm is. It's kind of like a reflection of the spirit realm, the digital realm. And I think the way it's like the way AI, for example, interprets images. It can't interpret it like we can yet. It looks at something and it tries to make the best it can of it to interpret what it's looking at. And that's where you get the six finger phenomena and the blending of one scene with another, but trying to create a perfect flow. It's kind of like, I feel like that's how people who have brain damage think and see the world and interpret images in front of them and process information, or how we see things in dreams. Do you get what I mean? It's got that very,
Yeah.
and that's what's uncanny. I think that's what's really uncanny about AI art